And we'll ask them to bring in Mr. Dr. Dax Basdio, who is the next witness.
I do solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give this honorable legislative assembly shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give this honorable legislative assembly shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Good morning, Dr. Basdio, and the committee would like to express its appreciation for you finding the time to come down here, because we know you do have a few irons in the fire as a result of certain machinations in the United Kingdom House of Commons, so we appreciate you finding the time to come. You know the rules require that when you answer the first question, you identify yourself by name and title, just for the records. We want to ask you some questions this afternoon on the Auditor General's report on government's use of consultants and temporary staff. And we also have a few questions that have been deferred or spill over from the interview with the Chief Fire Officer, because he kept saying, you got to ask the ministry, got to ask the ministry, got to ask the ministry. So he put you in the hot spot, but we'll manage it. So, Chris, you want to start, please?
Sure. Dr. Dax, first of all, thanks for coming this morning. As the chairman said, we know you do have a lot of irons in the fire. But one of the things I want to start out by saying is, one, we're grateful for the work that you and your team have been doing. As one of the things, as we said to the last witness, is that people sometimes believe that the role of the PAC is just to see if something is wrong. In many cases, some things are going right. Based on the report from the Auditor General, there are many things that are actually going right since you have taken over as Chief Officer. And our goal is to, one, keep the public informed as to those things that you guys are doing right. But then two, also, what can we do to improve some processes? And this is just part of the whole oversight process. So in this situation, I can assure you that, one, you're more here on the good side of things as opposed to the bad side of things. So I just wanted to set the stage for that. One of the things that came out of the Auditor General's report was the use of single-use suppliers. Now, this isn't something that is new, is not unique, is not something that has not been done before. And one of the things that we want to understand is the process surrounding why you would use a single-source supplier. And in some cases, why it's not competitive. And just to kind of understand the rationale behind the decision-making process in terms of not having some contracts to open bid to competition. Thank you.
Good morning, Dax Basdeo, Chief Officer in the Ministry of Financial Services and Home Affairs. I thank the member for the question. The ministry has not traditionally used consultants very heavily. I think more so now that the the subject has changed. We're much more involved in procurement for consultants. Historically, we've utilized primarily consultants for legal and public relations support in key markets, the U.S. in particular. And by and large, now we are doing an open competitive process. I do know that in the report there was one consultant for legal and public relations services that was done based on a direct award, but that one was a long-standing historical relationship. So it's a bit of an anomaly in that sense. But the others were all done through an open competitive process.
Thank you. I noticed you had said earlier in your answer that you mostly had used, focus on the U.S. market. Is that for lobbying in terms of the U.S. or in public relations? Is it more like lobbying is like Congress type?
In a way, yes. Rather than use the word lobbying, what we have sought to have done, we are continue to do now and in the past, is try to make sure that relevant politicians and officials in the U.S. are aware of fact, aware of Cayman's actions and our adherence to international standards. So certainly where there is misperceptions or misunderstanding of what this jurisdiction does in terms of international standards, we have used certain contacts that we've hired through consultancy arrangements to provide introductions to key persons, but also utilizing our own contacts as on an official level. We also have interaction with certain agencies as well. So lobbying to the extent that we are getting introductions to the right persons in Congress, for example, to try and give them factual information. But primarily, that was part of the role that the firms are doing on our behalf. The other key thing would also be to look at U.S. legislation, understanding that from our standpoint and how it impacts us would be the second key part of that relationship.
Well, seeing what has happened in the last 2 weeks with the UK and us, you would actually think that we need to have spent more lobbying in the UK, because clearly that was where the double cross came from, or the swords were drawn. So the question is now, in light of that, I mean, what are you guys looking at now in terms of getting that done on the UK side to make sure, because we're busy covering for the Americans and someone forgot to tell us that the British are coming.
Thank you for the question. The efforts on the UK have been sustained over the past few years. And I would say that we have made good progress, in particular with assistance of the London office, in getting in front of parliamentarians, both in favor and those not in favor of the Cayman Islands, to try and make sure they understand just what we do from a standards perspective, how transparent we are, to show them all the international assessments that we've done that prove the fact that we are transparent. You would recognize that not always do the facts matter in certain contexts, and sometimes the representations we provide have been dismissed. The particular instance in the last week is an interesting circumstance where a variety of other political factors had an impact on the numbers voting on the government side. So yes, I do think that we can do a lot more to educate and inform in the UK, both from a parliamentary perspective, but also from a public perspective. And certainly that's where the ministry is working very closely with industry to discuss how do we get in front of the right stakeholder groups, not just parliament or public, but also other industry associations in the UK, those who have opinions that may sort of speak to the quality of our jurisdiction, and make sure that we are getting the right message in the UK. So that's a process that we are going through right now, and we will continue to do and intensify given the current circumstances.
So in essence, then, we didn't get what we were expecting out of the UK. Because I think, because the London office falls under a different ministry, correct? So in essence now, you guys abdicated some of your responsibility to a different ministry and you ended up with something different than you expected.
I wouldn't say abdicated. We have worked in partnership with the London office. Certainly, we have coordinated on messaging, and when similar amendments have occurred in the past, proposed amendments occurred in the past, and they were defeated in both the Lords and the Commons, it was a joint initiative between Ministry of Financial Services and the London office, but of course, since the London office is on the ground, they're the ones that are executing on the behalf of the government. So it has been a partnership, and it has worked in the past. Again, this last week has shown different set of circumstances.
Well, to be honest, I know I used a strong word and did that just to see your reaction. What I'm looking for ultimately is ownership. I mean, partnership is fine, but somebody needs to own it. And at the end of the day, I mean, the London office still is not part of your ministry. And now you realize that regardless of who's on the ground, this is still now something for the Ministry of Financial Services to deal with. And I look at the skill set of based on the report of who you hired in the US to basically get the work that you wanted done versus the skill sets in the UK. And in terms of via the London office, and there's a mismatch in terms of the skill sets being used in the US versus the skill sets being used in London. So what I'm looking for then is recognizing, because I'm going to tell you right now, based on the people that I speak to in the UK, this decision did not come as a surprise. And the thing about it is the Labour Party has been running, to some extent, a very successful campaign against the tax havens. So and when you look at the look at where the UK government is in terms of the very slim majority that they have, it's a weak government and it's very hard to negotiate with very weak people. This was actually on the horizon, so this didn't really come as a surprise. So the question is then now, what kind of big guns or what arsenal do we need to be making sure now that we have in the UK? Because we're busy looking at the Americans and got caught, well, shouldn't be have been unaware, but we basically get caught out in the UK. And the damage has already started to some extent. So the question is now, looking forward, what, in terms of consultants or expertise or what, would you guys be looking now to beef up the UK with to make sure that, you know, yes, there's partnership, but the ownership has to be here for something, because this was a big boo-boo.
In looking at what's happened, and certainly I can't suggest that there was a surprise, because we knew that there would be a prolonged attack against us in terms of pushing us towards public registers. The indication, as I was saying, given the previous experiences, was that we were doing our best to make sure that the votes were in our favor, in the sense that the facts of the situation was put in the hands of either members of Parliament in either Commons or Lords, to make sure that they could speak from fact. And I do recognize, and looking and listen to all those debates, that they spoke to the information that we provided. So I do recognize that we were successful in the first few instances. Again, what happened last week was a bit of a unique situation given a variety of other factors happening. And we are certainly looking to change the approach, improve how we are engaging in the UK. And I do know, and certainly the Premier's announced, that there are other experts now involved in this process.
Thanks very much. One of the things from the public standpoint, no, the government has a very large vested interest in this, for the simple fact that it is well over a third of the government's annual budget in terms of revenues and everything else. But what the government makes from financial services, and even though it's still a driver of the GDP, it pales in comparison to what the private sector makes. Now, one of the things that, when you're talking about partnership now, the question is, because what we hear about is people need more money from government to do this. The question is now, from a partnership standpoint, what is the private sector doing to defend their portion of the what we need to do in terms of protecting the financial services industry? Because it can't be a situation where, one, everything is borne by the government and the private sector doesn't play a part when they're making far more money from what the government is making in terms of revenues from this.
Certainly from the government standpoint, a very significant increase in the budget allocated for supporting industry activity was put in place in this current budget. At the same time, we are trying to work a lot more closely with all parts of industry, drawing upon their expertise when it comes to either getting intelligence on circumstances in the UK or the EU, to understand what actions they are pursuing in terms of educating and informing on our behalf. And certainly as we continue to work on all the various international initiatives, we are heavily consulting, making sure that we're getting a wide cross-section of industry involved in the process. And certainly I'm very thankful that industry members and various associations have come together to provide support to the ministry in these exercises. Currently, for example, we've got a number of groups working on the issue with the EU, looking at their so-called blacklist, and trying to understand from their perspective how these things will impact us, and provide that advice to the ministry in terms of our overall position and how we can engage on a European front. So industry, certainly from a time spent perspective, have quite a number of volunteers and groups who are working actively with the government to try and support all of the activities that we are engaged in. And certainly the mandate that I do have is to work very closely with them to get their input and make sure we are on the right track.
Thanks, Dr. Bastia. The reason why I raised that question, just to put it in context, is that many of these law firms and different firms have presence in multi-jurisdiction. And it was, I mean, if you look at even all the businesses distributed now, especially in the Hong Kong market where they're doing quite well in different places, it's just a matter then of business being shifted from Cayman elsewhere. So a lot of them, in terms of the same, not to downplay the importance to them, but I would like to think that ultimately to the Caymanian people, where we depend on that in terms of tax revenues, versus for these guys, just a matter of saying to the client, let's move from Cayman to Hong Kong. Because one thing that we have seen with the financial services industry and the history of it, it actually moved from someplace to come here, and in just a matter of time for it move from here to go someplace else. So in terms of defending it and fighting for it, this still has got to be something that's central. So it's one thing for them to say that, oh yeah, we'll donate services, but this is a point now where we need money to fight money. And the question is not just that the money just isn't coming from the taxpayers, it's also coming from them. Yes, they have lawyers, but at the same time, those lawyers need their billing fees and all that kind of stuff. So unless they're working for free or they're bringing in some of their QC friends for free, the question is, who else is really fighting with us, putting resources up, I mean, manpower, money, and everything else that's needed to get past this? Because one of the things I am fearful of is that the financial services have not done as well a job of informing the public of the importance it is to the Cayman economy. And looking at some of the comments that came from a lot of people on Facebook and other social media, it's clear that there's a disconnect. I have people that's basically saying, you know, let it fall, let it go, and not understanding the full impact. So clearly there's a PR issue that needs to be done. And yes, we have spent millions overseas in terms of the public relations, but the one place where we have not spent the public relations is actually right here at home, where we need to get everybody on board. So with all of that being said, I mean, what we're looking for now is that partnership. I mean, is it the Maples? Is it the Walkers? I mean, which one of the firms is it that's saying, you know what, guys, let's do this together? And it's not a situation of their lawyers sitting in their offices saying, you know what, Cayman is on his way down, let's move the business elsewhere. And that's what we're looking for. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. While this year has been busy so far, and And I think because that we are so focused on fighting these external fights, we have not done as much as we could have to educate the local audiences about what are essentially very complex issues with sort of series of knock-on effects between jurisdictions. For instance, and what I mean by that is to say that things that are going on in Europe impact what's going on in the UK and the US. So there is not a sort of simple picture that we can paint in all respects. We have been extremely focused on fighting those fights, and industry has been right there along with us, helping us to do so. We are coordinating the efforts from the minister's perspective. Again, we've had a number of meetings and engagements with local industry to discuss approach, discuss strategy, discuss actions, and we continue to do so. So there is a coordination there, and I do expect that there will be some cost spent by industry as part of this process in terms of their own engagement as well. So from an international perspective, it's difficult, yet we are working together to try and achieve the right outcome. We do recognize, and certainly my minister recognizes, that we need to do more locally to educate the public, and that is certainly something that we have at this point discussed, and we're trying to do, and there'll be perhaps a bit more being done over the next few weeks as we try and understand how to respond to some of these threats. But it is a point that we're aware of, and although we are, as I said, more focused international right now, we'll need to get to that point sometime, hopefully this year.
Thank you. One of the things that I guess has been more of a concern every time these issues pop up, because I mean, I'm old enough. 1 minute it was for tax competition, next minute it was this, or we have had over the last 20 odd years all of these different battles. So this is just one more that we have to fight. And I know without a doubt that we do have the talent here, both in the public and the private sector, to weather these storms. One of the things I've noticed over the last few years is that we have moved to having more generals. I mean, I've all industrial leaders, but ultimately what has made a difference in the past is that we also had a lot of soldiers. And what I'm trying to find in this process is where are the soldiers? I mean, it's clear that the campaign has changed in the sense of looking at what the Labour government has been doing. I mean, I have people calling me like, oh, Chris, I didn't know the Cayman Islands was causing us so much trouble. So they have changed their tactics in terms of their campaign, and whereas we are generals still fighting the same battle or the same approach, the question is now we're looking for a difference of approach in terms of they have carried it underground, so now we need to take it underground. So where are those soldiers coming from in terms of battling this one? Because clearly now the landscape has changed.
I think one of the things I think we've done very well over the past 5 or 6 years is that we have been much more engaged in international fora on a variety of issues to build the sorts of relationships that allows us to understand what is going on from a governmental perspective and an international body perspective, and that certainly help us to try and plan more in advance and to be a bit more proactive rather than reactive. In doing so, it's helped us to work better with industry to develop strategies to address those issues. And I think over the past 5 years in particular, there's been a threat nearly every single year in the past 5 years, whether people realize that or not. We've effectively addressed those issues and perhaps dodged a few bullets. But that's come from a change in how we work and understand the landscape. Obviously, and I think you've rightly pointed out, the NGOs have themselves increased and become more sophisticated in their own campaigns. And part of our shift in approach over the last 2 years has been more direct engagement with NGOs themselves. Again, trying to adapt to how they're changing their approach. Obviously, there's much more that can be done. These are extremely well-funded bodies, the Transparency Internationals, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. they've got a lot at their disposal to really provide a tax on all fronts. We do need to adjust further, and again, that's part of what we are discussing with the industry, and hopefully we can make a difference in the new process that we're going to adopt.
It seems like we have used the whole, to go back a couple of years, the old McNamara strategies of the tent when we had with the nuclear weapons, and can we move more to the China thing of preemptive strikes, and is it possible to get the industry more involved? For instance, in this case, I haven't seen any articles in the international media by any of the industry players in Cayman supporting Cayman position, which I believe would go a long way to educating the public that these people represent. I think part of our new strategy needs to be is to engage the people that these politicians represent and somehow reaching to them. And I think part of that would be to use to encourage local industry, because I think the industry has to realize that this is beyond now the government carrying this battle on its own.
Again, thank you. That's a very good point. And in the past few years, there has been an increase in the number of articles produced by industry in various publications internationally. And while I would not suggest what we're going to do right now, I think part of our consideration is to be strategic in how we use articles to further an overall objective and overall strategy. So yes, it's being considered. Yes, we've discussed a number of different approaches. Until we will settle on the current strategy, given the events of last week, we're not going to fully implement all the options available to us until we're sure we're clear on the overarching approach that we're going to utilize.
I accepted that you don't want to give out your, you don't want to, but I'm talking more on a consistent basis, because we seem to sit back and let mainstream media, because yes, I will agree that there are articles that can be found in industry and professional related articles. Average person on the street don't read them, but London Times, the New York Times, these are the magazines that are killing us, because that is how the people who are against us are influencing the people to influence their politicians. And I think we have to start fighting them on their own front and not wait until they land on our shores. So I would hope that industry itself would be willing to, when they see something being said in the New York Times, to write an op-ed and put it out there, because if it's always coming from the government, that in itself carries a certain amount of skepticism, because we're defending our own position. But if the London branch of Maples and Calder's senior partner did an op-ed in the London Times on our beneficial or supporting the position that the government has taken on beneficial ownership, I think that would go somewhat to influencing the people who deem Hodge is representing in terms of her own political career. One of the how do you monitor the performance of your PR contracts? Do you, for instance, if there's an article that is critical of the Cayman Islands, do you expect some of your PR agencies that are under contract to respond to those articles? Or how do you monitor the performance of people you have hired for PR?
Thanks for the questions. It's a very good one, and that is an ongoing process. Once we have established a relationship with, whether it's a sort of a more mainstream type communications company or a law firm, there's ongoing communication, discussion on issues as they arise. So from a performance standpoint, it's not where they're left to do something and then we find out about it afterwards. It's an ongoing discussion anytime anything happens, where in some instances they're bringing stuff to our attention, in some instances we're bringing stuff to their attention, saying how do we address these issues. So from a performance standpoint, then it becomes almost a daily, weekly type issue where we're trying to make sure that we're on the same page with them and they're doing what we've asked them to do and trying to measure results. The hardest part is actually measuring results because in many instances it's trying to determine that we've changed opinion and therefore it's harder to measure that. What I can say is that once we've defined the projects that they work on for us, there are some indications of success. For instance, how many relevant, appropriate, high-level officials can they get us in front of to have discussions? And other more simple metrics, perhaps. Whether we sort of shifted opinion at that point in time, again, that's something that we think we have done based on what we've heard these officials say on our behalf or about Cayman after the meetings and so forth. But that's harder to quantify. But in general, there is, because of the relationship we have with these firms, there's ongoing discussion. If we are not seeing something that we being performed the way we want it performed, it's a feedback mechanism on a regular basis. So it may not be formal in the sense of a formal evaluation, but it's an ongoing discussion to make sure we are adapting as things happen.
I'm going to move from financial services, external issues, but I'm going to leave you with this Sun Tzu quote for you to, it's from chapter 6. It said, "Whoever is first in the field and awaits the coming of the enemy will be fresh for the fight. Whoever is second in the field and has the ace in the battle will arrive exhausted. Therefore, the clever combatant imposes his will on the enemy, but does not allow the enemy's will to be imposed on him." We have been a little bit too reactionary, and we need to understand that this is war for the survival of our people, and from that standpoint. Now, speaking of external, we're going back to the consultant issue. I noticed that you guys are the consultant for the fire station, which is good. But one of the more pressing domestic issues is what the banks are doing in terms of mortgages and all of these frivolous charges that they're imposing on the people, from paying them to make a deposit, charging the cash checks and everything else. The question is, have you guys engaged any consultant to deal with those people? And I say those being a former banker myself, just to put that out there, so I don't want to make it look as if though, I don't understand the nature of the beast. But the question is, what steps or what it is that you guys will be looking, or are you guys looking to hire anyone to deal with the bankers? Because we got these international people that's trying to take our business, and then we got these domestic people that's trying to take our money too. So do you guys have any consultants in the pipeline to deal with those greedy bankers?
Thank you for the question. I am not as familiar with this area of work. I'm not on a day-to-day basis involved in a lot of discussions from a policy perspective. I do know that Minister Rivers has taken a very keen and very leading role in this process. And there's been several meetings with the bankers associations, with SEMA, to try and make sure that we understand what the situation is and how to address it. There was work done previously on the same issue, and those preliminary findings were given to the ministry. And currently there is a process that has started to bring someone on to assist in looking at the issue more fully and developing solutions. Again, I don't know all the details as I've not been directly involved in the process, but it has been an active part of what the ministry has been taking care of. And there has been some engagement. There is some research that has been done, and there are some action steps that are being implemented as we speak.
Thanks very much. The reason why I raise that is that just as though we hire technical people overseas to deal with technical issues overseas, I mean, give me another word for, I don't use the word domestic terrorism. I don't use the word domestic terrorism. Is there, yeah, but either way, the flip side is, and the reason why I'm saying what I'm saying is that when you're engaging these people, regardless of wherever they're located, you still have to send the right person who speaks their language to basically juke them, as they would say, to deal with them. And from that standpoint, what I want to say to the ministry in this point is that go and find that person to go deal with the banks. Because what they're doing, I mean, if there's ever a time that you need an external consultant to go deal with an issue, this is one. Send somebody inside there to mash up them bankers' dolly house. Because we need it for that. I mean, I know we can't tell the government how to spend money, but this is one time it's actually needed. And the reason why I'm raising it is that when you look across the road, I mean, tomorrow, people are going to pick up checks for child support. And when the check is sometimes $60, $70 and someone is taking $10 from that, we could be doing, and that's per week. I mean, you're losing $40, $50 a month. I mean, on these things, I mean, it adds up for families who depend on that. So I would encourage you, these guys, to go find somebody to, deal with these people who have their hands in the pocket. Just switching to the fire station. I know it is something that you inherited, and one of the things I wanted to get, the committee would like to get an idea is, and I know this is even a little bit, that consultant cost has not been included in this, but since it's something that's topical and relevant, I figured this would be the right place for it in terms of what exactly is it that the ministry is doing to deal with the issues that we have at the fire station, and arising out of the PwC report.
Certainly, I think we're making great progress right now, and I'm hoping that the fire officers themselves see just how much progress is being made. We've committed to them a very aggressive timeline for delivering on a variety of issues, and we're doing our best to keep to it, and so far we are on track. The key thing with the PwC report, from my perspective, was the research that was done to look at operational standards and some other issues to understand what's going on in the fire service. But coming from that report and based on my own observations, I think one of the key things that had to be addressed, or has to be addressed, first and foremost, is stability in the leadership team in the fire service. To make sure we have the right individuals involved to not only stabilize the organization, but to make sure they're making progress and addressing the range of issues that I've heard that are affecting fire officers. Again, there are a lot of small issues I've heard about, but I do think that once you have stable leadership, we can slowly make, hopefully, or quickly take action to address all those concerns. So in terms of the process we've engaged with PwC, they've given us the starting point for a lot of work that's going to be done on the ministry side, and we have worked in conjunction with the fire service to implement a few things more recently. Primary, which is the move towards hiring full-time permanent posts in the senior leadership for the organization to remove all the acting appointments that have been historically been there for a good number of years at this point. We have engaged a small local firm to assist in an exercise to do coaching for the upper ranks of the fire service to make sure that those who are perhaps best in the best position to advance into the higher posts, to make sure that they are understanding their career path, to understand from our standpoint what training they've undergone so far, to make sure that they are prepared as best as possible to apply or to be promoted into these higher roles. At the same time, we've taken a bit of time to redo all the job descriptions, which were vastly out of date. And at this point, we have completed the posts for the upper ranks, and they're now with the fire officers themselves for comment to make sure we've gotten everything captured correctly and incorporated the new standards. So between the job descriptions being done, the coaching that's underway right now, and other interactions we're having with fire officers, we're hoping to be in a position to start the promotion board process for the deputy post by June of this year. Following that, the other upper ranks by July and August. And I'm hopeful that by August we'll have a strong team in place who can then continue the leadership of the organization and make sure all the other issues are being addressed.
There's this saying that you have to get along before you can go along. And one of the things I'm curious about is what exactly you, as in the chief officer, is doing. And I tell you why, or where I'm coming from. When you look at the public service management law, there's a lot of responsibility that is vested within the chief officer. No, as I said earlier, I know you inherited a big challenge to some extent, but one of the things from speaking to fire officers that remains is the issue with the ministry. So you guys need to rebuild that trust first, and where that has been damaged to a point that you guys may not realize is when they were trying to offer the fireman 50 cents on the dollar for their overtime and everything that they have worked. I mean, these are guys who spend time with their families to make this money, and they consider that an insult in terms of, yeah, that was actually done. So the question is this now, before the ministry can get anything, that trust and that credibility needs to be rebuilt. So the question is now, from the ministry standpoint, because the fire officers who are probably listening just want to know exactly what it is that the ministry is going to do to at least fix that back, because I can tell you, for some of those guys, it was personal, it was a matter of their dignity and everything else, that when they're spending time away from their family, sacrificing, and someone to say, I can't pay, I'm going to give you 50 cents to the dollar, as opposed to, guys, the budget is tight, can I give you half now and half later, as opposed to have this kind of attitude, take it or leave it, because, you know, so it is one of the things that you guys, that you have inherited, and if no one has told it to you before, I just want to put it out there, because it's one of the feedback that I've gotten. So from that standpoint, like, what exactly is the ministry doing, at least to undo the damage that was done in the past, at least to kind of, you know, get along before you can start going along, kind of thing?
Very good question, and certainly I think trust is fundamental to any relationship, and certainly in this case, it is a key component to make sure things are going to improve. I've personally invested a lot more time than most other departments in the fire service, trying to make sure we have a clear plan in place to address all these issues. I have done my best to meet with them on a number of occasions. In fact, I'm back there this Friday again, more so than most other departments at this point in time. So they are getting more of my personal attention because I understand that trust has been eroded. I don't expect trust to be built overnight, and which is why when I've spoken to them, I've gone to give definitive timelines and dates that they can hold me accountable to deliver on. They have those commitments, they've seen those timelines, and Friday when I go back again is to show the same timeline and progress is being made and we are still on track. So I'm hopeful that if we can demonstrate as a ministry that we are taking the right action, making progress, and delivering on our promises, that at some point that trust can be built back up again. But I know it's not an overnight process, and we're going to continue to invest to make sure our time and energy and efforts to address their issues. But it's not going to be as fast as some of them would like. In hearing their feedback, I know they've been waiting 5, 6 years or more. There are those who are beyond frustrated. There are those who are not willing to wait any longer. We are going as fast as we can with the right amount of pace, bearing in mind the complexities of some of the issues that they've had to deal with, and make sure we do things the right way. Again, wanting to make sure we are fair and competitive in our recruitment processes, to make sure we have the right individuals, because if we get that part wrong, that's not going to serve the service any well going through the next few years. We've got to get that part right.
I thank you very much for that question. And one of the things I want to put out there is that one of the feedback that has been given is, for the people who have engaged with you, is that they found you to be a decent and straightforward person. And I just want to at least record that's one of the positive feedbacks I've gotten where you are concerned. And like I said, I think you are moving in the right direction in terms of getting that done. And I'm really sorry that you have that to deal with, but I just want to at least thank you on behalf of the people I represent for at least the approach that you have taken and at least being fair and straightforward with many of those guys.
Mr. Chair, through you, I have here the copy of the Hansards of the questioning with the fire chief. I will be giving you a copy of this, and I'm humbly requesting a meeting with you at your convenience, but as soon as possible, to go through these answers to show you where it's obvious in many ways And once again, to repeat what the member from Bordentown just said, you inherited this. There's no doubt in anyone's mind who is fair and has any common sense that there have been people who have been hired who were not qualified. I like to use the simple analogy. When you go for your driver's license, the first thing is you have to be 17. And 3 weeks. If you advertise a post and it says you need this, and you hire someone, as in the case of the chief officer who did not meet the requirements, the fire chief, sorry, my apologies, the chief officer is qualified to be governor, actually, this one.
He's good.
Then you hire a HR in another ministry that only has a certificate when it asks for a degree. Something's obviously wrong. In the contract, 3 things that he was supposed to have gotten done was succession plan, not in place yet, job description, PwC did that, and there's 3 things that was in his contract that the ministry has since had to hire PwC and spend $80,000 of our money when we got people that they're hungry and need help, people losing their homes. I am asking you, and what Mr. Saunders, the minister from Bordentown has said, I too have gotten from the firemen and their families. They feel you will be the only hope because people that were there before you, people below you, and people above you have all been tainted in their ways or been touched and in their word about the information that you will be given to make your decisions. Please see them all, listen to them all, and make your own decisions. That's the one request that the people are asking. They have some faith in you. In others, they've been burnt too many times. Every time they're supposed to get a pay raise, for the last 5 years, I've sat in this house and all you hear is, it's being looked into, it's being looked into, it's being looked into. That's all the firemen. Whereas along the way, everybody else has gotten a pay raise. How can you be working 30 years, operating a $300,000 piece of equipment, putting your life at risk, and not even making $3,000 a month? That is something to think about. So, how much will you personally be involved in the sussing out of these top officers? And you did say, I do believe, that from station officers up will be, or substation officer up to the who's there will be all be given a fair chance for an interview and be given a shake to apply.
Yes, that's right.
And will things like, if an individual has taken it upon himself, and I'm going to quote what the deputy governor said in the Cayman Compass, and it was presented on the floor of this parliament, civil servants who better themselves academically will be given a chance for advancement. Will these people who have got themselves more qualifications beside the training that the fire service gave them, and is specific to fire service, will these people be given a fair shake? In other words, they didn't get a degree in turtle farm. They went and got a next degree in firefighting issues. Will those credentials be looked at and taken into consideration and not being made to be belittled by the present chief fire officer who seems to think it's only good if it comes from Sirico? Will all these other people be given a chance and be given a shake and be listened to?
Certainly my approach is to make sure we have the best candidates and select the best candidate for the positions we have, factoring all variables, whether it's experience or education, whatever the case may be. That is part of what's mandated and part of what we have to do to make sure we have the right person selected and for the future. There's no question in my mind that that has to be done.
Mr. Chairman, through you, on behalf of a lot of people in this country, because do not ever fool yourself that people respect our fire services after Ivan. Do not feel that people don't love them for what they did after Ivan when a lot of police disappeared. Thank you very much, Chief Officer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I just have one request, really. When I look at the hierarchy of the fire department ranks, it starts with recruit, then fireman, leading fireman, sub-officer, station officer, divisional officer, senior divisional officer, deputy chief, and then chief. That's the hierarchy from my research. It is difficult if you hire somebody who has only been at the rank of a sub-officer and you expect them to train a station officer, you expect them to train a divisional officer, you expect them to train a senior divisional officer, you expect them to train a deputy chief, and you expect them to train a chief when they have never held any of those positions. So this is the kind of crap that you inherited that you just have to basically clean up. And I'm really sorry that you didn't have a better place to start, but I can say, like I said, the guys you have dealt with, I found you decent, and all the interactions I've had with you have always been decent and polite, always been professional, and if there's anyone who can actually get this mess cleaned up, I believe it'll be you. And it's a bit unfortunate because, and what I'm about to say, some people may not like, but I'm going to say it anyway, that wherever a certain individual have gone, kind of mayhem follows behind them, and just more stuff to clean up. So you can read between those lines, but I just want to say, for me, thanks very much for what it is that you're doing, the approach that you are taking, and I really appreciate it.
Yesterday we heard evidence from the ICTA and the whole off-reg group, and one of the concerning things that they gave evidence on was hazard management. Most people here is 911, but hazard management is currently undergoing a substantial, shall we put it that way, equipment, six point something million, I believe it is, in new radios and all that sort of stuff. And ICTA say they had basically not been consulted, but and in fact that they had launched a fund on the ICTA for replacement of hazard management radios and stuff, because they realized that the whole framework was somewhat outdated. But that, unfortunately, that money got swallowed up when we created off-reg, and there was not proper funding in the budget for it. Is there any particular reason why the expertise in ICTA in terms of communications was not consulted?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not familiar enough with what happened over the past few years. The contract to replace the radio network was signed, I think it was late last year, but had been outstanding for a good number of years. Maybe it was an issue of, again, this is opinion that I don't know what's happened, the fact that it's been outstanding for so long that they weren't recently consulted on it. I do know, since inheriting both HMCI and the Department of Public Safety Communication, that there have been some discussions and communication with ICTA on a number of projects, joint projects. But I don't know specifics, but I do know they're talking to each other.
And one of the other things that concerns us that they raised was the fact that the whole hazard management communications requires a certain number of license from the ICTA under the ICTA law, and it didn't appear that that section of the ICTA law was being complied with by government. So you may want to look into that aspect of it as well. And this was one of the contracts that was single source provider, was it?
Not to my knowledge. If I can recall correctly, and I did see some of the early paperwork from previous, there was an extensive process that was undertaken through CTC a few years ago, which identified a number of providers. There was then a change in approach, and based on the submissions, only one candidate emerged, but it had been based on an open competitive process, to my knowledge.
Okay, but even when the single candidate emerged, for some reason, the local agent provider was completely ignored and eliminated from the process. Do you know whether that was a financial thing? Otherwise, they didn't want to pay their costing?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know the answers. Again, I wasn't involved in the process at that point in time.
And the current, there is consideration of some kind of upgrade to the CCTV cameras for crime. Is that being handled as a single source provider of an upgrade on the current system, which seems by reports that we get from the police as to have been hopelessly inadequate and never went even close to delivering the kind of clarity in photography that was expected?
To my knowledge, we have a significant budget this year to address the CCTV network. I do know that there were some concerns with poor quality of cameras in the past, and the ones that they're procuring now, I think are a lot better, and that's no longer an issue. Again, not being as intimately involved in that process, I do know that all of my departments have been engaged with the Central Procurement Office to make sure that they're following the right procedures when it comes to the new law in particular. I can investigate further, but I have confidence that they're doing things the right way.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with a single source procurement as long as it's handled correctly within the procurement process. But I guess the public account's concern is that this was the company that won the bid the last time, and many of the competitors claimed at the time that they did not bid on the same quality of cameras, and that government was going to find itself exactly in the position that it is in. And one would hope that, having worked with a company for a number of years, and the service is such that, I mean, I guess to put it deplorable is not too strong a word, because I mean, for instance, the accident that happened in my constituency a couple of weekends ago is less than 200 feet from one of these cameras, but yet the police are out appealing for eyewitnesses. The only assumption that we can make is that the cameras weren't working. Right? Because if the cameras are working, you're looking at a red car, you should be able to see a red car on the camera. So I guess our concern is that we're making sure that we're not getting the same position, that this whole thing was orchestrated in the very beginning by underbidding other people to produce a lesser than required product, because it would be able to negotiate upgrades under some other scenario. Okay, so I guess we're giving you that warning because we will be looking very closely at it when it comes here.
Sorry, forgive me. If memory serves me right, we had spent $5 million on those cameras. And again, they basically
Of no use.
what happened to the, I mean, I tell you what, Doc, you can save me the trouble of filing a parliamentary request from now to get an update on what happened to that $5 million worth of camera, because like I said, major mayhem. Wherever some people go, certain things follow. But anyway, I think I am pretty much my question. I just want to say from, like, on behalf of my people, thanks for what it is you're doing. Like I said, decent, polite, professional. I appreciate the fact that if you didn't know, you say you didn't know, as opposed to some people who prefer to come down here and just outright lie. So I am very appreciative of that. No, it is welcome. If you don't know, you don't know. And we can live with that. I mean, we don't expect everyone to know all the moving parts in the ministry.
I don't know if it is the truth, is a legitimate answer.
Well, silence can be misrepresented but never misquoted. Dr. Basdia, thank you very much for taking the time and keep up the good work. And if there's anything that any of us inside here can ever do to help, just we're all on the same team. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And your get out of jail free card has been issued. We'll adjourn for lunch and we'll come back at 2 o'clock. So you can please get a message to Miss Gloria to come at